Hi, this is Rob Sheen from the Source Conference, and I'm here with Roxy Dee from Hurricane Labs, and she's going to be speaking at the Source Phoenix Mesa conference that's being held on February 28th and March 1st. So we're happy to have her on the show. So the topic of your talk is unlocking the value of CVEs, which is really interesting because I think a lot of people have a lot of confusion around what the CVEs are and how you can use them. So we're happy to have someone that can shed some light on that for us. So, so for the uninitiated, what are the CVEs at a really high level, like 20,000 feet?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me at Source Conference. I'm pretty excited. Um, so CVEs are what we use to gain information on what vulnerabilities are. And they will be numbered. Sometimes they'll even be assigned, or most of the time they'll even be assigned before vulnerability is released. So there's always that CVE attached to it that you can go look up and see um, a description and different vectors, which are what I'll get into in my talk, that kind of explain, um, you know, the different aspects of the vulnerability and whether or not it might affect you or your company, I should say.
Awesome. So you mentioned in your abstract that CVEs are generally, they look like kind of like a giant mess for people that aren't really familiar with them. So what are some of the challenges with organizing them in a way that's reasonable? And, what are people that are not kind of the uninitiated? What are they to do to kind of get started?
Yeah, when I started out in information security, I wasn't very familiar with CVEs, and it kind of there's a lot of words and a lot of terminology that you may not immediately be familiar with, and sometimes the way that the descriptions are written can be a little confusing. And I admit, years later, it still takes me time to like reread descriptions sometimes and understand, what exactly is going on. So I wanted to explain some keywords and some of the terminology to help people kind of understand it a bit more and how to use some of the other data involved as well, like the vectors and the CVSS score.
Cool. And what's the CVSS score for those that don't know?
So the CVSS score is a score that goes along with the CVE, and it's on a scale of 1 to 10, and it's kind of a best guess for the severity of the vulnerability. However, there's many factors that go into that score, and sometimes you do need to rescore it based on your own infrastructure and your own threats.
Awesome. Who do you see as kind of the target market for the CVE? Is it security researchers? Is it developers? Is it management? Or is it kind of all of the above? Like, who do you see most using these things?
It would be mostly infrastructure people. We do hear um, a lot of just go ahead and patch, like regardless, patch everything, keep it up to date. However, for people that are in infrastructure, that are the engineers, they need to be able to prioritize patching and as well as be able, management needs to be able to understand and communicate what the priorities are as well. So I would say it would be great for both engineers and management to understand. And especially because it takes a lot of the fear out of um, out of vulnerabilities so that management and infrastructure engineers can react in a focused and organized way.
Yeah, one of the things I've always found useful with them is if I'm trying to research a particular issue, like just say SQL injection. If you just Google
Hmm.
SQL injection, you're going to get all kinds of information, some written by professionals, much of it not. And so I've always found them to be useful to be able to figure out, all right, the ones written by professionals are probably tagged with the CVE, and you're going to definitely get information about, the issue no matter what it's called or labeled in the wild.
Right. And also with all of the media coverage that vulnerabilities are getting, right now it's very easy to read an article, you know, and and there may be some inaccuracies or may
Mhm.
just be difficult to understand. So whenever I hear about a vulnerability, I look for the CVE and I look at the CVE before I start reading the media coverage, and
Right.
that helps.
Yep. Um, yeah, no, I've definitely found that too. There, said there's some issues too, like cross-site scripting. Some people call it stored and reflected. Some people call it, what do they call it? Now I'm losing the word. It's the word that I hate using, so I've blocked it out of my mind. um,
It's okay.
it's basically there's two different ways that people refer to it, and one of them drives me crazy, so I stop using it, and I tell people to stop using it, but people still refer to it. So if you link it with the CVE, at least you can kind of figure it out. Um,
Yeah, it leaves a lot less for interpretation,
right.
definitely.
Yep. So all right, cool. So for those that aren't using them yet, is this something that people would generally use as part of a large organization or a small organization, or is this really something for everybody?
I think most organizations are using it in the form of the scoring, which they may not be analyzing the score or reassessing the score, but most vulnerability management programs, it would be easiest to just pull in the CVSS score. However, I think in order to analyze and understand and prioritize and have a um, really good vulnerability management program, you do need to consider the other vectors as well, which describe other aspects of the vulnerability.
What are some examples of other vectors?
So, for example, there's one that indicates the level of access the attacker must have in order to exploit the vulnerability. And this could be useful if you have mitigating factors or if you have things that may restrict that access already. So you can prioritize that a bit differently than one that, would require, one that could be exploited with remote access.
Got it. And it just popped into my head. Persistent and non-persistent was the word I was looking for. So
Oh,
sometimes
right.
sometimes they call it persistent, not persistent. Sometimes they call it reflected and stored. I actually think reflected and stored is more clear to developers who I teach a lot of. And if you say persistent, not persistent, sometimes people don't know what that means exactly. So anyway, that's just it. But by
Right.
by tagging
Yeah.
it with the CVE, you kind of know, oh, that's what they're talking about. You can read about it. It makes sense. Um, it bugs me when things.
The way we word things and words mean different things to different people, those can both, affect our interpretation.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
cool. So definitely looking forward to the talk. I love talks that kind of shed light on things that we sometimes take for granted in the security community if we've been using it every day and we don't realize that. I always tell people, you know, 15 years ago, the security bus left the station and took off, and a lot of people have been, following along, and every once in a while the bus breaks down and we got to replace the tires and whatever else, but we're still on the bus. But there's a lot of people that never got on the bus. So it basically things that level set for them and help them understand the tools that we use on a day-to-day basis are great. So I'm happy to have you speak at the conference on this.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I've been wanting to address this issue for a while because I myself had to go through and look at the vectors, and I'm just really excited to share it to hopefully take away some of the fear when it comes to vulnerabilities.
Awesome. Taking away the fear is good. All right, cool. Well, we'll see you at the Source Mesa Phoenix conference on February 28th and March 1st. And for those listening along, if you want to continue the conversation about CVEs or anything else on security, we're going to have a great group of people there. Join us in Phoenix. Thanks.
Thank you.